Now we want to take a look at how we can use some of our Excel objects, our other objects like worksheets and workbooks, to create new worksheets, create new workbooks, delete, things like that. So the first thing I want to do is show you the environment I've got set up. I've created a file called Chapter 8 macro.xlsm. It's a macro-enabled workbook. And I've created, instead of sheet 1, I've named it macro. And I've just put a shape on here, and I've tied this shape back here to my main sub. So if I run this now, it runs main. Main calls another sub that's lower down named aggregate, and this sub just returns a message box. So nothing too technical going on so far, just calling one sub from another. Next, I want to add worksheets. So I want more tabs across the bottom. So just to demonstrate some functionality, I've got some very specifically named subs here. And inside of this sub, I'm going to add just a little bit of code that will create a worksheet. Now, I also have this notion of active workbook. So active workbook is the book that is selected and that you're working in right now. So if I had two workbooks open here, this one is now active workbook because it's the one that has the focus, or it's selected. If this one were clicked and were selected, it would be the active workbook. And we'll look at how we can switch the notion of active between the two later. But for right now, just know that active workbook means it's this workbook, and this workbook is selected and ready to accept input. So into this active workbook, the sheets object, I want to .add. If I run this, I can see that it just adds before, and it just gives us the next sheet number in line. So I've added and deleted several out of here. I'm up to sheet 13 now. If I want to give it a very specific name, I can tell it the name, use the .name property, and pass a name to it. Now I'm using the active sheet. So what happens with active sheet, it's just like active workbook. If I were to create one, this is the active sheet because it's selected and it's ready to accept input. If I click this, now it's the active sheet, selected and ready to receive input. So active workbook, this workbook, we're going to create a sheet, add, it's going to put it here. Now the next one will be named sheet 15. When it creates it, it automatically becomes active. So now we can say the active sheet name, change it to Mike. So in the book, create the sheet. The new sheet will automatically be active, so then we can use active sheet, the .name property, and give it a name. And it looks like this. I have some different ways I can create new worksheets. I can just simply, inside of a workbook, I can do worksheets.add.name. And this is probably the most succinct way to do it. We take these two lines of code, we can shrink them into this one. So I'm going to add worksheets. I'm going to use the add method, the .name property. I'm going to pass it results. And again, it'll add it at the beginning. So right in front of macro, I would expect to see Mike. And then right in front of Mike, I would expect to see a result sheet. Now, if I want to very specifically control where those sheets are placed, I can use the before and after properties here. So if I'm doing this one, it's going to just add the worksheet before the first worksheet. So this one is just a counter. So first it'll add Mike right next to macro, then it would add results, and then it would put this one, it would then treat results as the first sheet. So it'll add aggregate in front of that. So whatever is the first sheet, it'll place this new one before it. If I want to place it at the end, I might have one worksheet or I might have 20 worksheets in here. I don't know. So I'll use the worksheets.count method to essentially return a single number. So if I have 4 worksheets, this will count it up and realize there's 4 and put 4 in there. So now it's put it after worksheet number 4 and give it the name summary. When we do this, it looks like this. So again, following the code order, first thing it did was create a new worksheet, which would have been like 15 or 16 in front of macro. Make that the active sheet, since when it's created, it becomes active, then give it a name, Mike. To shrink those 2 lines of code into a single line of code, I can do this. And again, it just adds it before the first worksheet. The next thing, so aggregate isn't there. We have results, Mike, and macro. So the next thing it's going to do, it's going to add one. It's going to add it after, count up the number of worksheets, replace this code with a number, so it would be worksheets 3 at that point, put summary. So it puts it to the end. And then the last thing is place it before worksheet 1. So it's always placing it at the very beginning. So just several things we can do with our with adding worksheets. So if we want to be able to add worksheets, we should also probably be able to delete worksheets. And if we're going to delete worksheets, we just simply use worksheets delete and give it the name of the worksheet we want to delete. Now, this isn't using code name, this is using tab name. It's okay if we're creating the worksheets on the fly or as part of our code like this. The user doesn't have the opportunity to rename them, so we can probably delete them. If they are worksheets that are persistent in this workbook and that aren't created and deleted, but we use them time after time, we probably want to give them a code name so the user can't change them, the name, the tab name, and break our code. But again, there's not a good way to create a code name for worksheets on the fly. So we're just using the tab name. Now, when I run this, it'll find the worksheets named Mike and it will delete it. But the problem is it prompts me here and it says, are you sure you want to do this? So if the user clicks delete, then the code will go on. But if the user clicks cancel, then it escapes out of the code and it never goes on to finish what it was supposed to do. So we really don't want the user to have the opportunity to make any decisions. We just want it all to happen for them. So we're going to suppress the alerts. So application.display alerts, we're going to set that to false. And now they will not be prompted. The thing is, we don't want those to be off all of the time. So as soon as we're done with that line of code, that requires the user to do something. So when we're ready to turn them back on, we need to turn them back on. So the flow is basically turn them off, do the thing that causes the alerts, and then turn the alerts back on. Just so later in the program, if we need to make decisions or if we can tell when things are broken, different things like that. So the best practice is to turn it off, do the thing that causes the alert, and then turn it back on. And so I'm creating 4 up here, and I'm just going to delete the 4 down here. So I'm turning off the alert, doing all the deletion, and then turning the alerts back on. And they're gone. The other thing that we want to know how to do is switch between these workbooks. And if we were manipulating them manually, we would click on the tab and it would make that the active workbook. So we need to know how to do that in code. So if we want to select a worksheet, we first have to activate it. If we try to do something like this, where we specify the worksheet and then the range and then the method, it generates an error. So this doesn't work for us. We have to take the extra step of activating the correct worksheet. And then once we've activated the worksheet, then we can manipulate it and work with the range inside. So here we're going to activate the results worksheet. It's as though we clicked on the tab, and then we're going to select D5. So to prove this works, let me just choose another worksheet. And I can see that the results worksheet was activated. And then we chose D5. If I wanted to then activate another worksheet, so the worksheets.activate helps us move between the tabs. And it's really important to know that if we're going to take information from results and copy it to summary, that we must first activate results, choose the data, copy it, then activate summary, choose the destination, and paste it. So we have to make those logical steps in our program to choose the different worksheets.